There's a version of Sunday that belongs entirely to routine. The kind where you wake up late, make coffee, and let the day happen to you rather than the other way around. No obligations, no deadlines, just a slow drift of hours marked only by the position of sunlight on the floor. I've learned to appreciate those Sundays over the years. The ones with no plans, no expectations, nothing to prove. They used to feel empty. Now they feel necessary. This Sunday was different. Not because I had plans, because I couldn't stop thinking about her. It started with the coffee. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, watching the steam rise and curl toward the ceiling. And I remembered the way she'd held her mug during that rainy walk. Both hands wrapped around it, fingers interlaced, like she was warming herself from the inside out. The way she'd look down at the steam before taking a sip. Small detail, not the kind of thing you're supposed to remember weeks later, but I remembered. I took my coffee to the window. The city was gray, ordinary. The same view I'd seen 1,000 times from this same apartment. Rooftops, water towers, the occasional bird cutting across the sky. But now it felt different. Now I wondered if she was looking at a similar sky from her own window, drinking her own coffee, thinking her own thoughts. The parallel of it. Two people, separate, connected only by the possibility that maybe, at this exact moment, she was also staring out at the gray and thinking about me. Probably not. Probably she was just living her Sunday. Laundry, groceries, reading on her couch with a cup of tea. The same nothing I was doing, just in a different room under a different ceiling. That's the rational part of my brain, the part that knows the world doesn't revolve around these small connections. But the other part, the quieter part, kept whispering, maybe. Maybe she was thinking about the umbrella, the way we'd walked in sync without discussing it, the way we'd stood at that corner getting wet and neither of us wanted to leave. Maybe she was replaying it the same way I was. I didn't text her. Neither of us had texted since that night. Not because we didn't want to, because we'd agreed, without saying a single word, to let things happen slowly, to let whatever this was unfold at its own pace, to let the silence be what it was. But silence, I was learning, can be loud in its own way. It can press against you, fill the room, become its own kind of conversation. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, put it in the rack, the ordinary rhythms of a Sunday morning. But my mind kept circling back to her, to the way she said, "Okay," at that corner, to the way her shoulder had felt against mine, to the way we'd parted without promises, without plans, just a quiet agreement to see what happened. I decided to go for a walk, the kind of aimless Sunday walk where you let your feet choose the direction and your mind choose its own wandering path. I put on a coat, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The air was cold but not punishing. The kind of cold that wakes you up without making you miserable. The kind that makes you glad to be alive even when you're not sure why. I walked through my neighborhood, past the same streets I always walked, but everything looked slightly different. The light, maybe. Or maybe it was me. Or maybe it was the way she'd started to color everything, like a filter I couldn't turn off. I passed a small cafe and glanced through the window. Couples at tables, friends laughing, someone alone with a book and a pastry. Normal Sunday things, the kind of scene I'd walked past 100 times without noticing. But now I found myself looking for her, scanning the faces, the tables, the corners, not because I expected to see her, just because looking for her had become a habit I hadn't noticed forming. She wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. But for a second, I imagined what it would be like if she were. If I pushed open the door and she looked up and smiled that small smile. If I sat across from her and we didn't say anything and it felt natural. The fantasy lasted maybe 3 seconds before reality reasserted itself. I kept walking. I thought about the last few weeks. The grocery store where we'd stood in the pasta aisle like no time had passed at all. The rain where we'd shared an umbrella and discovered that silence could be a bridge. The corner where we'd agreed to let things happen slowly. It felt fragile and solid at the same time, like something that could break if you held it too tight, but might survive if you just let it be. I wondered what she was doing right now, at this exact moment. Was she also walking? Was she also thinking? Was she also wondering if the other person was thinking about them? The parallel moment question. The one you can never answer, but can't stop asking. Probably not. That felt too much like a movie, too much like the kind of coincidence that only happens in stories. But the thought stayed anyway. It walked with me, kept me company, filled the space where conversation would have been. I walked until I reached the small park I'd forgotten existed, tucked between two streets, hidden by trees, the kind of place you only notice when you're not trying to get anywhere. Empty benches, bare branches against the sky, a layer of frost still clinging to the grass, a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain. I sat down on a bench just for a minute and watched the world do nothing. A dog walker in the distance, bundled against the cold. A kid on a bike, too young to care about the temperature. A woman with a grocery bag, walking fast, probably heading home to her own Sunday routine. Ordinary things, the kind of things you see every day and never remember. But I remembered them because she wasn't there to see them with me, and that absence made everything feel sharper. I thought about how strange it is that someone can become part of your inner landscape without you noticing. One day they're a person you used to know, a memory from another life. The next, they're a presence in your thoughts, a reference point for everything. Not in a desperate way, not in the way movies portray longing, all dramatic and all-consuming. Just in a quiet, persistent way, like background music you only notice when it stops. Like a smell that reminds you of somewhere you used to live. I didn't text her. I didn't pull out my phone at all. I just sat there, letting the cold settle around me, and I made peace with not knowing. Not knowing what she was doing, not knowing what this was, not knowing where it was going, or if it was going anywhere at all. Making peace with not knowing felt like its own kind of progress. That's the thing about parallel moments. You never know if the other person is experiencing them too. You never know if they're sitting on a bench somewhere thinking about you, wondering if you're thinking about them. You just have to trust that maybe, somewhere, they are. And even if they're not, the thought itself is enough. It's its own kind of connection. A connection that doesn't require proof or confirmation, just the possibility. The light started to fade. The sky shifted from gray to something deeper. I stood up, brushed the cold from my coat, and walked home. Made tea, sat on my couch, didn't check my phone. But that night, before bed, I opened our chat, the one with no messages since the grocery store. I stared at the empty screen, the cursor blinking, waiting. I typed something, deleted it, typed something else, deleted that too. In the end, I just left it blank, a message that said nothing, which maybe said everything. I wonder if she'll ever know. I wonder if she's lying in her own bed, looking at her own ceiling, wondering the same thing about me. Probably not, but maybe. And maybe is enough. For now, maybe is enough.